Fairly easy question, no? No sin. I have done what is obligatory on me. There's nothing more required of me. But now if I do the nafilah, the 4 after Salat al-Maghrib, the 2 in the seated position of Salat al-Isha, what have I done? I've done more than that is required of me. Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, when Imam Ali alayhi, when my grandfather Ali, when my grandmother Fatima az-Zahra, when they gave away the food, they were not required to do so. It is just the highness of their character, the highness of their goodness and their fear of God that led them to that. Same goes for those who sacrificed what was rightfully theirs and gave it to somebody else. See how Islam teaches us what is required and what is considered to be highness. Islam is about intelligence, and the balance between what is considered to be israf or extravagance and miserliness, not giving, is very subtle. And it's not just about what is wajib and what is not wajib, or what is mustahab and what is wajib. It's about our own nature, and I'm going to try to hopefully explain that to you. Okay. So how many of you know what is called the hedonic set point? Anyone heard of this phrase, the hedonic set point? The hedonic set point means each human being is used to certain amount of pleasure in life. Okay? When you become used to a certain amount of pleasure, that's what makes you happy. That's what, anything that pleases you. If you reduce that for any given reason, what happens to that insan? They struggle because you have a set point. Moreover, the data shows, the science shows, that it's very difficult that if some human being has a hedonic set point, meaning a set amount of pleasure that they derive from their daily life that is here, is very difficult for them to go down to here. It's very difficult to reset that point. Look at your own self. Believe me, I'll give an example. I derive pleasure out of drinking my coffee in the morning, no? Oh my God, that cup of coffee in the morning, that hits the spot like nothing else. And if I don't get it, I'm in trouble. If I go and say, no, I'm not going to have my cup of coffee and I'm going to reduce it, I'm going to be a total mess. I won't be able to function. I won't be able to survive. Why? Because I have become used and accustomed to a certain level. Now, why? Because there's some value to this action of mine. There's something that I derive pleasure, but also I consider it to be valuable. I consider it to be beneficial to me, is it not? Whether tangibly or intangibly. That's why I'm doing it. Now, there's another beautiful thing that happens inside of us that we don't realize. It's essentially a seesaw in our brain, all right? Everyone know what a seesaw is? Yes? You're asking me, how is he going to bring seesaw into the middle of this conversation? I will. What does a seesaw have to do with this? The two modalities in your brain, pleasure and pain, sit on a seesaw in your brain. The science and the data, the neurochemistry on this is conclusive. It's very clear. And the studies demonstrate this behaviorally as well, that these two, pleasure and pain, they sit on a seesaw. What does that mean? Meaning your brain, your mind, wants to keep these two flat. It wants to keep them balanced. It wants the seesaw to remain in a horizontal position, such that if you press down on the pleasure side of it, what does the brain try to do? The brain will compensate by bringing the pain side down as well, meaning it will exert something that causes pain inside of you. You may not realize it, but it happens. Why is that? Because the mind, the human body is this way. It wants to maintain equilibrium. It wants to maintain balance. It does not want to be too far one way this way or too far on the other side either. Now, why is this a problem? Is Allah saying you shouldn't have pleasure, you shouldn't have happiness? No. Allah is not saying that. Allah is saying you're human, you have emotions, you have desires, you should feel, you should have connections that put a smile to your face or pursue things that make you happy and fulfilled, no doubt. The problem is when you push down on it too much. When you push down too much on the pleasure side of your brain, when you press hard on it, the brain will compensate by pressing equally hard on the pain side. Why does that happen? Because again, balance. How does it manifest itself? it manifests such that if you don't feed the pleasure side, which you've been pressing down on very, very hard, what's going to happen to the pain side? The pain side will be so extreme, so hardly pressed down, that you will experience both depression and anxiety. The data shows it. These are not my words. It's the body's way of compensating. That's why always they say that be happy, pursue those things that make you happy and give you pleasure, but be careful if you press down too hard on that pleasure center of yours. Because the minute you do so, your mind will try to compensate. And not only will it will compensate so hard that if you don't realize that the fulfillment of that pleasure is not going to happen, you will create anxiety and depression inside of yourself. Look, Quran has been talking about it. Islam, Deen talks about it. It does so. Does it talk about the seesaw of pain and pleasure? No, it doesn't. But it does teach you about this balance. That keep that balance inside of you. Ensure that yes, you pursue what you want that gives you pleasure, that has value to you, extrinsically, intrinsically, and otherwise. But realize that when you go too far in one direction, it will cause trouble. That's why even for a believer, it's one step higher. I said to you, right, that what is the baseline for a human being is not necessarily what is considered to be the best of the best. And that's why the ayah of the Holy Quran says for the believer, it's a very different circumstance. And the ayah of the Holy Quran says it very clearly. أَحَسِبَ النَّاسَ يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّ وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Do the people think that they will be left? That they will claim to be believers and that the test is not going to come upon them? Imagine. Why? Because God wants to maintain balance inside of you. So is this Islam's message of minimalism? No, not necessarily. But it is a warning that if you pursue that which pleases you, realize that you are prone to suffering, that you are prone to pain, and that in the balance of life, you have to ensure that your pursuit of pleasure is going to be moderate. It's not going to be extreme. And that's why sometimes God puts trial on you. And He does so when Allah puts a test on you. Maybe He takes something materialistic away from you. He doesn't fulfill your wish the way you asked of it from Him. Don't take it in a negative way. Take it in a way that maybe I was pushing too hard on my pleasure center. And this is God's way of resetting me back to balance. Bringing me back to my balance. It's very hard to see it. Because when we are in pain, we don't see clearly. When we are suffering, our mind, our vision, our heart, our sentiment, everything is changed. Everything is changed. But if we believe in Allah, we trust in Him, then we know that maybe this is His way of saying, come back into balance. So that's one thing. The other thing is human nature, all right? Let me ask you of this. How many of you look in the mirror? I only have two people who look in the mirror. Everyone else is very humble and they come out looking fresh and clean and beautiful without looking in the mirror. Guaranteed, everyone looks in the mirror. You all look in the mirror. Everyone has to look in the mirror. What, you go to the bathroom, there are no mirrors in your bathroom? Everyone has a bathroom mirror, yes? So you look in the mirror. Okay, when you look in the mirror, what do you see? You see something familiar, right? Unless you're like me, you go in the mirror and you get scared by your own, face. Especially in the middle of the night when you get up and you got to go to the bathroom or something, you turn the light on, you see your own face and you freak out because it's hideous and scary. That's only me. But you look in the mirror, do you see something you don't recognize? No. You see something you recognize. Now, let me take, for example, if you look at yourself in the mirror, and let's say I'm standing there next to you, or someone who is a friend of yours is standing next to you, and you look at your own face in the mirror and you look at their face in the mirror. When you look at yourself in the mirror, is it the same reaction, the same sentiment that you feel when you see your own reflection versus when you see theirs? Is it the same? No, it can't be. They are not you. You are you. You are familiar to yourself. They, even though they may be a close friend, they may be a relative, they are not you. They are something that is external to you. So when you look at them as quote unquote what? A stranger. So they did a study, and this was a little scary, no? They plugged some people up to do a brain scan on neural activity, right? So to look at how the brain lights up. And what they did was, they showed people pictures of themselves. And they showed people pictures of others, strangers. And they looked at the brain activity. They asked some questions, and they looked at the brain activity of these individuals. When you look at your own face, right now, a current picture of yourself, your brain lights up in a certain way. The neural activity is a certain way. Whereas if you look at a stranger, your brain will light up in a different fashion. The neural activity is different because you're looking at someone who is not you. They are a stranger. You don't recognize them. So your neural activity in that phase is very different. Now they did something else. How many of you have tried this? And you can admit it, don't be shy. How many of you have downloaded the app that takes your picture and turns you into an old person? How many of you have tried it? Only Rami. Rami always raises his hand. And Adam over here. I've done it. It doesn't look very different from what it looks like now, let me tell you. They took these people's pictures, these participants, and they made them look old, okay? They sort of manipulated them with this technology, digitally altered them such that they look old. And they showed them the picture of themselves as an old person, much, much older. We're not talking 10 years, we're talking 40 years older, 50 years older. And again, they measured the neural activity. Guess what the neural activity looked like? Like it's looking in the mirror? Was it like they were looking at their picture, current picture, or was it like they were looking at a stranger? It was as if they were looking at a stranger. Their brain lit up. They're looking at their own picture, digitally changed to look old. They know it's themselves as an old person. Yet their brain activity was that of looking at a complete stranger, not themselves, older. And what these scientists theorized is that it may be us, but we don't think about ourselves down the road 50 years. We don't think about ourselves as me. That's why, what does insan do? Insan hoards right now. Insan keeps for themselves immediately, because you've not thought about yourselves. If I were to come to say to you as a stranger that, hey, look, you've started up a 401k, put my name in there. Make me a beneficiary, right? Let me get some of that as well. How many of you will accept that and say, yes, let's put Mehdi Hazari, we'll write his name in there. I'll even give you my social security number, my address, everything. I'll make it easy on you. None of you will agree. Why? Because I'm a stranger. Why would you go and save your current earnings, what you have now, and give it to somebody else, to a stranger? Would you? You will not. And so what does the science show? The data shows that that's how you think about yourself in the future. That why should I take what I have now and save it for a stranger? Meanwhile, the stranger is just you 30 years down the road. My dear brothers and sisters, what is Quran teaching us? Look at the end. We talked about this yesterday. See the end final point. That's why when you are living life, it's not about being minimalistic. It's about considering that right now is not the only time in which you are going to exist. You may exist 10 years from now, if Allah allows. You may exist 50 years from now, if Allah allows. And what you have to consider is that time. Now, is he saying that go and hoard and save, a big 401k and put everything into savings and make sure that you have a nest egg and etc.? No, not necessarily. Why? Because there's no guarantee you're going to make it to that point. And in the end, if you do, you have essentially left it for somebody else. It's not for you. So imagine the message of the Quran. Not only is it talking about being moderate in what you acquire, what you save for yourself, what you apply to your daily needs, but certainly in those intangible, valuable things that you want to carry forward. Insan has a habit of only thinking about now and not thinking about later. And that is not just material. It goes for everything, everything, everything. It applies to everything. And that's why it teaches moderation. It does not say that you shouldn't be wealthy if God has given you indeed. It doesn't say that you shouldn't earn a good living. No, if God has given you, by all means. But at the same time, recognize what that earning does to you. recognize what a certain lifestyle will do to you in terms of your mindset. And that the more pleasure you derive out of that lifestyle, out of what you have earned, the more to be a believer you are going to have to experience pain. And if you don't experience that pain, then ask yourself, where is your path leading you? Because pain, trial, suffering is indeed, it's a means by getting us to God. It is the means by which even the Imam, as he's reported to say, is Allah wanting to hear your voice in that moment of suffering, that call on me in this moment of suffering. And maybe he doesn't take the pain away, doesn't solve the problem, doesn't remove the trial, because he still wants to hear your voice calling upon him. And because maybe you pressed down too hard on that pleasure center. This is life. And this is the advocacy of Islam. This is what Islam teaches us. It's related that a man came, companion of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. Salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. He comes after a long travel, and Imam says, where have you been? He says, Yabna Rasulullah, I went here, I went there, I visited these people. And Imam says, what did you do? He says, I went and I taught them everything that you have taught us. Meaning I shared with them what you, our Imam, our teacher has taught us. Imam, he says, what is it? What is it that I have taught you? Tell me. The companion, he says, Yabna Rasulullah, the first thing is that human beings are constantly seeking for someone who is beloved to them. Someone who they love more than anything else. They want that love, they want that connection. However, you have taught us that every beloved dies and goes, and the only beloved is Allah. So what have we done? We followed your instructions and we only sought the love of Allah. Look at it, how beautiful. Imam, he says, beautiful. He says, correct. What else? What else have I taught you? The companion, he says, Yabna Rasulillah, we see in the world people are seeking honor. They want to be honored. And they're going to this extent to achieve the honor, or they want to achieve such and such to be honored, or they want to seek a path by which they think that they are going to be honored. But we know from what you have taught us from the Holy Quran that inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, that the most honored amongst you are who? The ones who have the most taqwa, the ones who have the greatest fear. So the companion, he says, Yabna Rasulillah, we have chosen a life of taqwa, of piety and fear. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, he says, that is correct. What else? He says, Yabna Rasulillah, we've seen in the world that human beings are chasing after amusement. They want those things that fulfill their basic pleasure, their basic desires, and their whims. And we know from you that, Yabna Rasulillah, the Quran, what does it say? وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. That Quran teaches us that whoever is fearful of the position of their Lord and what they represent in front of their Lord as a lowly servant, they deny their lowly desires. They get rid of their whims and know that Jannah is waiting for them. The greatest of pleasure is sitting there waiting, but they cannot see. The man, he says, Yabna Rasulillah, we give this answer and we live a life by which you have taught us. Imam Sadiq, he says, that's a correct answer. What else? What else? The companion, he says, Yabna Rasulillah, we see the people going around the world saving, hoarding their wealth, and keeping it for a moment in which difficulty comes. Saving away and keeping the wealth locked away, stored away, so that when the time comes, they can rely upon that wealth. He says, but we have learned from you, Yabna Rasulillah, مَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يُقْرِضُ اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا فَيُضَاعِفَهُ لَهُ. Whoever gives a loan to God, a goodly loan to God, God will multiply it for them. So we, Yabna Rasulillah, have taken all of our money, all of our possessions, and we have saved it with Allah. Because when we need, there is no one better who will pay it back to us than Him. Subhanallah. Look at the answers. Imam, he says, that is a correct answer. What else? The man, he says, Yabna Rasulillah, we see the people have made enemies of each other. They fight with each other. They have animosity and aggression against each other. But we have learned from you that the Quran says, Inna ash-shaytana lakum adu, fattakhiduh aduwa. Shaitan is an enemy to you, take him as an enemy. So what did we do? We stopped fighting with the others, Yabna Rasulillah. And we identified shaitan to be the enemy against us. Imam, he says, and the riwayah is long, so I am cutting it short. Imam, he finally says one thing. He says, what else? The companion, he says, we see the people not only depending on wealth when they need, on their possession, on what they have acquired, but they depend on their own bodies, depend on their own minds. And we, your followers, follow what you have taught us, which is what the Quran says, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَل لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَالِغُ أَمْرِهِ قَدْ جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدْرًا. The ayat of Surah At-Talaq, he says, O grandson of the Prophet, what does the verse say? Whoever fears God, God will always open a path for them. They don't have to worry. And not only that if you depend on God, God is going to be sufficient for you. Why? Because God has determined the right measure for you. This is the course of our life. And again, do not take it to mean that you should not acquire, you should not have, but keep moderation and balance. And remember that when trial comes, it may be that spark that God wants reignited in your heart to bring you back to humility, back to balance. And that's why you see the example of those who are the highest of the high. Because they say, reach for something. And maybe God knew. And it's not that maybe God knows everything. But when I say that, I mean He knows our nature. That it will be very hard for us to live truly a life where we have discarded every material gain, where we have not sought the most pleasurable, the most comfortable life that we possibly can get. It's very hard to live that way. Extremely difficult. And that's why He gives you the beacon of the beacons, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. The examples of Imam Ali alayhi salam, Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam, that there is a high way of living that you can aim for, that you can reach for. Why? Because in it is your salvation, in it is your advancement. You're rising up towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My dear brothers and sisters, that same Imam of ours, Imam al-Sadiq, it's reported that the Banu Abbas had begun their persecution of him. And in one reported event, the Abbasi Khalifa sent one of his men, and he, after hearing that Imam Sadiq has all these students, these people following him, he said, go and burn the house of Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salam. The man, he comes, they light fire to the house. Not only do they light fire to the house, but the house was filled with the family of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. When the house is a burning inflagration, it's burning from top to bottom, the women, they run out of the house. They run out of the house. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he takes water and he starts to put the fire out. Eventually, when the fire has been put out, the report states that he goes and he sits against the wall and he slumps down on the ground. His head is down. The companion, he comes, he sees Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, his head is down, he looks a little sad. He says, "Oh my master, how is it that I see you in this sad, very introverted state? This is not the first time such persecution, such tyranny, such difficulty has been inflicted upon you by these people. It's not the first time. How is it that I see you this way? It's reported Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, عندما أحرقت الدار وفرت النساء ذكرت فرار نساء الحسين يوم عاشوراء. He says, when the house was burned, and the ladies of my house, they ran out of the house. They fled the fire to safety. I remembered the running of the ladies of Imam al-Husain's family, my grandfather al-Husain, on the day of Ashura. He says, my companion, today I had water to extinguish the fire. They had safety to run to, the ladies of my house. But where could Zainab al-Kubra run? Where could Kulthum run? Where could Sukaina bint al-Husayn run? There was only desert. Water had been denied of them. When they were taken, the earrings were snatched from the ears. The hands had been tied with ropes, chains, and made to walk through the battlefield until they reached Kufa. And inshallah, tomorrow I will describe to you a little bit about the difficulty of this journey. There are some details that show the cruelty of the enemy towards Banati Rasulillah, such that when they are brought towards Sham, they come to a door where they say, Kulthum, she asks Shimr, she says, take us, you have brought us here as prisoners. Take us through a side entrance so that the eyes of the people don't look at us. Shimr, he brought them right into the main door of Sham. And more so, he brought the head of Imam Abi Abdullah al-Husayn on the spear and told the rider who was carrying it to ride in between them, so that all the eyes will look at the head of al-Husayn and then look at Banati Rasulillah, at the Sabaya. They are brought into Sham. Even the Rawi, he says that the head of al-Husayn was placed on a tray in front of Yazid, and that he will take of his stick and he will hit the face of Imam Husayn with the stick. And the strange thing is that there are some people who say that Yazid did not want to have Husayn killed. Yazid did not mean harm on the grandson of Rasulullah, that it was the actions of those who were acting beneath him, his army generals and Ibn Sa'ad and Ibn Ziyad and these people. Yet how do you reconcile that statement with him sitting there and mocking the face of Imam Husayn, taking prisoners into Sham? And the Khariba of Sham, the prison of Sham, they are brought, and the report states that they are placed in this place where there is no roof on the house, on the compound where they are being kept, such that the sun is beating down on their face all day, burning the skin of their face, burning the skin that is exposed to the sunlight. The Rawi, he describes that finally word reaches into the palace that some prisoners have been brought. They are mostly women. They are being held in a prison just outside of the palace. A lady from inside of the palace, she descends down with her entourage. It's reported she comes to the door of the prison. They open the door of the prison. The maidservant, she brings a chair. She places it there in front of the door. Listen, my dear brothers and sisters, listen. These are the daughters of Rasulullah. These are the ones raised in the lap of Rasulullah. This lady from the palace comes, the chair, the seat is placed in front of the door of the prison. She comes, she sits down. She looks inside the prison. She sees the ladies sitting all against the back wall of the prison cell. She says to them, min ayyi bilad antun? Which country have you come from? Which nation have you come from? One of the ladies from inside the prison, she answers, Nahnu min al-Madina. We are from the Medina. The lady on the chair, this honorable lady from the palace, she says, Al-Mudun kathira. There are many towns, there are many cities. Which city? That same lady from inside the prison, she says, Min Madinati Rasulillah. We are from the city of Rasulullah. The minute she says we are from the city, from Medina al-Munawwara, from the city of Rasulullah, the lady sitting on the chair from the palace, she gets down and sits on the ground. The question comes from inside, from the prison. Only one lady inside the prison is speaking. She asks, why did you get down from the chair? The lady who descended from the chair, now on the ground, she says, because you said you are from the city of Rasulullah. Out of respect for you, for the people of that city, I came down off of my chair. This same lady, she asks, tell me, I want to know, give me some information because I used to be there in that city where you have come from. أسألك عن دار علي وعن أبناء أمير المؤمنين. I want to know about the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib in Medina, and I want to know about his children. أين الحسين ابن علي؟ أين أم كلثوم؟ أين علي ابن الحسين؟ أين أبي الفضل العباس ابن علي? Where are all these people gone now? Suddenly, give me some news. I have not heard anything from those people. I used to be there. I used to know them. The lady from inside the prison, she answers, she's saying, أما إذا سألت عن دار علي فلقد خلفناها تنعى أهلها. As for the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the last we left it, it is mourning the members of the household because of their death. وإن سألت عن الحسين فرأسه عند زوجك يزيد. If you are asking about Al-Husayn, his head is on the platter in front of your husband Yazid. This is Hind, the wife of Yazid, sitting in front of the prison cell. The lady from inside of the prison, she says, if you are asking about Kulthum, she is sitting next to me right here. She is right here next to me. If you are asking about Ali ibn al-Husayn, he is sick in the corner with fever, suffering from this illness from our days gone by. If you are asking about Sukaina bint al-Husayn, we have buried her in the grave in Sham. She has been buried in this very prison cell. If you are asking about Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas ibn Ali, if you are asking about Abbas, his body is near the Mashra'a. His body was left near the river of Alqami. The left and the right arm severed from the body. The spear in his chest, the head has been severed from that body. Finally, she becomes silent. The lady who is sitting now in front of the door of the prison, after listening, after maybe shedding some tears, she asks, she says, أين سيدتي ومولاتي زينب بنت علي? Where is my master Zainab al-Kubra? Where is Zainab? وكأن بسيدتي ومولاتي زينب الكبرى وهي تقول تقول أنا زينب اللي يحجون عني. I am that Zainab. I am that Zainab who they are asking about. Hind, do you not recognize me? I am sitting right here. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا على محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله. اللهم إنا نسألك وندعوك ونقسم عليك بحق الزهراء وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها لعن الله ظالميها. اللهم شافي كل مريض، اللهم رد كل غريب، اللهم فك كل أسير، اللهم غير سوء حالنا بحسن حالك يا كريم. اللهم وفقنا لمراضيك وجنبنا معاصيك وثبت أقدامنا على صراطك المستقيم وخذ بأيدينا إليك يا أرحم الراحمين. وفرج عنا يا الله فرجا عاجلا قريبا كلمح البصر أو هو أقرب من ذلك. وافرغ علينا صبرا وتوفنا مسلمين. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد. أحسن الله إليكم.
Thank you guys for joining our night 2. Inshallah, that will be concluding night 2. And inshallah, same time tomorrow for the third and final night with our respected Sheikh Mehdi. So inshallah, ya Rabbi, we'll see you guys tomorrow night. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.